As we begin these reflections on this commencement and the liturgy we are celebrating, I want to once again thank Father John Jenkins for his very, very thoughtful invitation to be here and the warm welcome. I also want to recognize my brother priests, members of the Congregation of the Holy Cross, all of the large congregation gathered here. I want to mention just a few names. Former Speaker John Boehner, it's good to be here with you. Also, General Martin Dempsey, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The former chairman of the board, the outgoing chairman of the board, Richard Notabert, and also a good friend, a member of the Board of Trustees, Jim Rohr. I'm going to stop there because if we continue on, we may never get to the rest of the ceremony tomorrow. But I do have to mention all the graduates of the class of 2016. None of us make our way through university alone. With us on the journey are our professors, the administration, our friends, our family, and above all, our parents. All those who accompany our graduates deserve our thanks. But we also come together this evening to thank God. Less than 8 months ago, our Holy Father, Pope Francis, visited our country, and all of us witnessed the riveting power of his simple gospel message and the way in which he lives it. Recently, in his apostolic exhortation, The Joy of Love, he tells us how important family is and how important our faith family is to each one of us. But here at Notre Dame, you have become part of another family, the Notre Dame University family. And this gathering, your time here, your experience here, reflects the best efforts to sustain and nurture your appreciation of family life and your appreciation of your faith family. I would like to share with you just a few thoughts today on the importance of being part of that great faith tradition that offers you the wisdom and the light to guide you as you make your way through life towards whatever is your chosen goal. Out of the many benefits of an education here at Notre Dame University is your understanding that you're really not just here for a career. You're not just planning for a career. You're also experiencing an understanding that you're responding to God's call for the rest of your life. And that involves a relationship with God, part of the faith family experience. You've had the opportunity for a formation of mind and heart and spirit. And in your openness to this broad range of education that you've experienced here, all of the data, facts, science, technology, you've also encountered the wisdom of God. We've come here to appreciate more deeply in the experience of university life here at Notre Dame the ancient wisdom that it's not by bread alone that we live. Once I received a very, very beautiful floral arrangement. It was exceedingly beautiful, and it had all kind of green, leafy things, and in it were these beautiful flowers. I said to the housekeeper, we really have to take good care of that. It's a beautiful, beautiful plant. She said, you leave it alone and it has a chance. But I noticed that when I would come every morning into the living room. While the plant was flourishing, some of the flowers were beginning to wither. And I felt the soil, and it was moist, and there was plenty of sunlight in the room. But a few of the flowers each day withered a little more. And it was only when I took one of them that had completely faded out of the arrangement did I notice this ingenious little mechanism. The flowers, not all of the flowers, were connected. They were in these little vials, plastic. You had one. You've received one. I can see from the reaction. The flower was in this little vial with its own little bit of water and just stuck in the soil. But when the water was gone and the flower wasn't connected, it simply withered. It had no source of nourishment. In John's Gospel, Jesus says, every branch needs to stay connected to the vine if it's going to bear fruit. Whatever image you use, whether it's the vine or the plant, the message is the same. It's vital. It's absolutely essential to have roots, a solid foundation. No one branch, no one person, no one part of society can become isolated, cut off, and expect to flourish. It just doesn't happen. We can't get cut off from our roots, our history, and our defining experience of life, faith. Science and technology have brought mankind enormous benefits. But science and technology by themselves don't save us. They don't define us. Grounded in the material, they ultimately don't provide the hope that every human being needs, a hope for a far wider vision. Science without ethics, art without spirituality, technology without human moral values, materiality without transcendence, they all remain simply branches in search of a vine. All of the branches have to be connected to the vine, or they simply wither. Your generation faces great challenges to the whole idea that we are all part of God's plan, interrelated in a way that calls all of us to make this world a better place, to actually change this world. And Jesus announces that he had come to make all things new. Never give up on that hope. Never give up on the hope that you can achieve this goal. You can and should make this a better world. And to make this happen, I ask you to consider 3 identifying elements in your life. 1, your relationship to God. One of the first things we did when we came onto this campus earlier today was to drive down to the grotto and then to visit the Basilica. Your relationship with God has to continue to be an identifying element in your life. But your second overriding element is the obligation you have to one another. And the third is your part in realizing, actually making happen, this better world we speak of. One of the social developments of our age, and of your generation in particular, is the phenomenon of texting. Not all that long ago, I was speaking to a young man, or attempting to speak to a young man, who was deeply engaged in his smartphone. And since he was visiting me, I thought I could at least make an effort to speak. And I said, how many texts do you send a day? And he looked up and said, about 300. And then, as if having to explain that, he said, "How else would I stay connected?" And then, as if he were explaining this to his younger brother, he said, "You know, it's important to stay connected." And I couldn't agree more. It's important to have friends, family, associates, and to stay connected to them. But it's also important to stay connected to that deeper reality of our existence, our relationship with the Lord, who is truth, who's life, who's love. That relationship, staying connected, makes all the difference. He's the vine, and we flourish to the extent that we keep connected to that vine. How appropriate that we would be celebrating this Baccalaureate Mass as the Church is celebrating Pentecost, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. It's precisely in that gift. It's precisely in that gift of the Holy Spirit that each one of us can claim and hope and aspire to stay connected with everything that's beautiful in the gospel, in Jesus' message, in the way of life he offers us. You've been well prepared. You don't set out on this journey now alone. The celebration of your commencement is the recognition that you have shared in the mission of this university. And you've come to understand there's a much bigger picture to life, and that includes this closeness to God. That's one of the driving and defining elements in your life. You have to be able to answer that question out of all the things you now know how to do, out of all the things that science provides you, out of all the technological responses you're capable of. You have to be able to answer that question. Out of all the things I can do, what are the things I ought to do? What are the things that are the right things to do? Is what I can do always what I ought to do? Each one of you, each one of us here has been gifted. We have to use that gift. The second identifying element of life follows on that first. The recognition we have a relationship to God and therefore to every other person on this planet. God said, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God, and then love your neighbor as yourself. We have that obligation to one another. I'd like to illustrate that with one brief story. I was waiting at my place at the airport at the gate for the announcement of the flight. And at the gate next to me was a family, a mother, father, and 3 children, and they announced that flight was going to depart from another gate, 8 gates down the concourse. And they announced that the boarding was immediately. And so the father, holding the tickets, started down the concourse and said, I'll let them know we're coming. And the mother and 2 of the children who were a little older began to move much, much more quickly. The littlest one, his steps were, of course, much smaller. And it didn't take long for him to fall behind. And from where I was seated, I could see this look of panic on his face. He was going to be left behind. And then one of his older brothers turned, saw this, and simply stepped back and took his hand. And in that simple gesture, all the panic evaporated, and this beautiful smile came over the little boy's face. He wasn't going to be left by himself. Our task is to see that when we make our way through life, we try to make sure that there aren't those being left all by themselves. And it's part of what you've learned here on this campus. Love the Lord your God, keep that relationship with God, and then remember that we have obligations to one another. You're graduating in this year that has so many challenges and so many opportunities. But the third and final point I ask you to remember is that you do have the power of the Spirit to change this world. Behold, I am making all things new, Jesus said. Not by bread alone do you live. And this university has said to you, out of all the things you can now do, you also know what are the things you ought to do. May you always bear in your heart that simple challenge of Jesus. Whenever you ask yourself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with my life? How am I going to respond to this situation? How am I going to answer these needs? You're going to make all things new. Don't ever give up on that dream. It's yours. It belongs to every disciple. You can make all things new, walking with the Lord, walking with one another, and keeping that vision before you. It is possible to renew the face of the earth. And that's the gift you take with you from Notre Dame University, the gift you've received, and all of the future and possibility that's yours. And what you do with it is up to you.